Movies entertain. Entertainment leads to emotions. Those emotions connect us to our enjoyment of film.
And that is why we exist, to focus more on the emotional connection than the technical merit.
Because every movie makes us feel something.
Hello, listeners in attendance and the trillions listening around the world to this week's edition of the Feelin Film podcast. I like the echo there. I'm Patch, once again in my corner, ready to do battle for the heavyweight podcast championship of the world, is my best friend and co-host Aaron.
Wow. 2 weeks in a row. For those who did not listen to the Rocky IV episode, it got better, I will say. It got a little more extravagant. I feel like, much like Apollo Creed, the more times you enter the ring, the more bells and whistles you add.
Yeah, the first one was Rocky. This one was Rocky IV. Like, I was like taunting everybody, taunting Russians and things like that. And, you know, I had explosions behind me, and James Brown was, you know, living in America with me on this time around. So I felt pretty good about it.
Nice.
Well, this week we ventured out to the theater to catch the latest entry in the Creed verse, with Michael B. Jordan not only starring, but also directing the film. For those tuning in for the first time, know that we are a full spoiler-filled show breaking down our thoughts on the entirety of the movie. So you have been warned. Hopefully this isn't your first time. Hopefully it's your 360th time joining us if you're a devoted listener. So you know the drill. Watch, listen, enjoy the conversation. Here we go. All right, Aaron, we were both excited about this. I think we've both sort of really enjoyed this sort of offshoot of the Rockyverse. And to me, I think what really made me excited about this entry is that it felt, from the trailer at least, fully independent of the Rockyverse. Now, as someone who loves Rocky, I can tell you that it would be a surprise to hear me say, I'm glad that Rocky's not in this. But I don't think he needs to be. I think that the point of the trilogy, the point of these Creed movies, is to slowly sort of migrate away from the source material that made it possible. So I was really, really digging the fact that the story itself, it was really all about Adonis and Damien, this past. How do we get this reconciliation? What's it going to look like? And so my interest was peak. I was like, okay, I'm in. I was in from Creed 2. Well, I was in from Creed 1, but you know, Creed 2 left a lot of excitement for us. I really enjoyed that one. I don't know that I felt that way coming out of this theater experience. And I'm going to give a disclaimer, listeners. This is the first time in a long time that I've been to a theater, one with my wife, because she doesn't go with me to a lot of these. I usually hit matinees on like Thursdays or Fridays, you know, when I have time, because there are movies that she's not interested. This was a Saturday night, 6 p.m. show. We'd grab some dinner. We'd get into the theater, and we sit down, and look, there's going to be a ruckus, usually. You know, movie stars, people are talking during the trailers, cool. It didn't stop. And in particular, there were these like 8 or 9 JDs, juvenile delinquents, as I call them, hooded, coming back and forth into the theater, just talking at this volume, getting their cell phones out, scrolling through. And I really got agitated. And I started thinking, if I wasn't podcasting on this thing, I would walk out and demand my money back, because that's how I felt so angry. And by the time the movie was over, like, there were times when they would leave and then my adrenaline would kind of go down. And I'd be like, okay, we can fully enjoy it. And then you'd see 2 or 3 of them pop back in. And I'm like, why are people not like taking care of this? And then I remember movie theaters these days, at least in my town, are run by teenagers. You know, you can't find good help these days. And when it comes to that, I sound like the crotchety old man, get off my lawn, and I'm fine with that. But the fact is, you go to a movie theater when the lights go down, you don't need a 2.5 or 3-year-old baby going, bah, 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 behind you, and another 2.5, 3-year-old popping her iPad open to play a game because your parents couldn't find a babysitter. I understand. Circumstances are circumstances. At the same time, there's etiquette that lives in this world. And I have no problem admitting that some of my opinions about this movie probably stem from my movie experience. In no way did I think Creed 3 was bad. I thought it was a good movie. I was entertained. I really do want to watch it again at home, independent of that, just to see if my vantage point changes. But when I think about it from Creed 1 and Creed 2, I think that there were some things that were missed for me from Michael B. Jordan's directorial sort of story here. It felt a little formulaic. It felt a little bit safe, a little bit predictable. And in some places it felt like, I don't know that I could believe that in this kind of world. Even though the Rockyverse has given us sort of a larger than life character in Rocky Balboa, and then with Creed, Apollo, and then Adonis, I didn't really feel like I got that kind of closure, if there is one. I kind of don't want a fourth Creed entry, because where do you go from here? And so I wanted to really ask you, as someone who probably saw this with critics, folks that respect the movie theater, what did you take away from your experience watching this third entry?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with you on everything you just said, and there is nothing to apologize for at all, because there is an etiquette that is an expectation when you go to a public space to enjoy a piece of art or a piece of entertainment that you and other people have paid money to experience. And you're right, I don't have to deal with this hardly ever, because I almost never go to the movies outside of my press screenings. In fact, it's 95% just me going back to see something a second or third or fourth time when I've already seen it the first time, right? I'm going back to see it in Dolby or in IMAX, or, in Top Gun's case, I'll go see it if they project it on an iPad and have me pay for it, whatever the case is. But you're right. And this is one of the reasons why I love that Alamo Drafthouse is expanding across the country slowly but surely. And I really hope that you get one. I hope that we get one up here in Seattle, because they're known for enforcing their rules. And I don't think that they are run by a bunch of teenagers, like you said. And that's just the natural way that a theater staff is. And it very untypically has a staff that is willing to enforce quietness throughout the theater. Like, they just don't pay attention to that. Now, if somebody was to get up and leave the theater to go tell the staff, you could probably get them to do something, but you're going to end up causing a scene, because they're going to come in and you're going to miss the movie in the meantime anyway, because you had to get up. It's all a nonsense, awful kind of cycle there. So yeah, I feel for you. And I hate that your, date night, Saturday night movie that you're hyped for gets ruined by this type of experience, and for you and anybody else. So we can just, put down the official Feelin Film position is that stuff is not okay ever, period, exclamation mark. There is no circumstance in which it's okay to have an iPad with your child playing it while everybody else is trying to watch a movie. I'm sorry. There's not. If you can't get a babysitter, then it's on you to find a way to make your life work. If you can't get to the theater, this is not me being elitist. There are plenty of things that I just can't go do in my life. And I accept that because I either am not willing to make the sacrifice in order to go do them, or it's just a place that I just am not meant to be. So for this time in your life, a couple years till that kid grows up, suck it up. Think about people around you is what it boils down to, right? Think about people around you. So anyway, ranting over, my theater experience was great because it was, a press screening. Now, we do have often people with us that are not critics. The difference is these are people that stand in line with free passes in order to make sure they can get in. And so generally speaking, they are usually very well behaved. We have had some experiences, in fact, this year specifically twice in recent month, where people have headphones out and there's been yelling matches in the theater, which is just, again, if you're yelling at somebody, front row, put your phone down, 3 times in a row, you're actually causing more of a disruption than the person with their little phone out in the front row by themselves, to be honest. Anyway, movie Creed 3. I had super high hopes for this, just like you did. Absolutely adore the first two. I came out of this one thinking it was really good and had some extremely strong qualities, but that it did not elevate to what my expectations are for the franchise. And a couple of primary reasons for that were like just big detractors in a way that I could not overcome them. And it wasn't because I needed it to be a certain way. I guess it was, actually. I'll take that back. In a sense, yes, I do think that I needed a certain style of movie to be in this franchise the way that it has been. And some of the changes I did not enjoy, directorial wise and from a script standpoint. So I personally felt like the rookiness of Michael B. Jordan as a director, I could see talent, but I could also see things that where I just didn't align with his vision and the way that he presented. And then I also feel like script-wise, there were some misses here, and I can't help but wonder if that's because I think it's Coogler's kid that wrote the movie. His last name's Coogler. And I'm thinking that, you know, this is a thing where they're kind of like trying to pass down this franchise. And you're not Ryan Coogler yet. I don't know how old the person is, but I know that they're not like a seasoned, you know, award-winning screenwriter. So this is something new to you. But you're stepping into this franchise on the backs of two really super strong scripts. And I had some weaknesses that I could pinpoint that really distracted from me interacting with the characters in the way the movie wanted me to interact with the characters. And so that's where my disconnect of like, I couldn't get to loving it. I only could like it.
Yeah, I look at the movie and there were moments that were really, really great. And then I don't think everything weaved together, bobbed and weaved, if you want to use a boxing reference. I don't know that it culminated with everything that we were seeing into a cohesive story. Not one that didn't make sense. Like by the end of the movie, everything made sense, but it seemed to make sense on a short film level or, you know, a rookie level. And again, there's preconceptions. You know, Michael B. Jordan, this is his directorial debut, correct? So sort of having that in my head, I fully admit that I'm thinking like, oh yeah, I could see these rookie mistakes. Whereas if I saw Ryan Coogler's name on it, or I saw Spielberg, or I saw whoever, maybe I would have a little bit more grace by thinking, oh, this is something that, this is different. And so I fully sort of, you know, am very self-aware that I'm thinking about the rookiness of this. At the same time, they're holistically, it's not that some of the things wouldn't happen in quote real life, but it was a very elementary story. That's where I think I landed, is that the story overall felt very elementary, sometimes quite literally. I look at the story of Creed or the story of Adonis and Damien, and I asked my wife, I said, do you think that if Damien had won the fight, that he would be coming into Creed's locker room and they would be reconciling and have the same conversation? And she's like, no, not at all. And I just kept thinking about schoolyard fights where you have these two people who have this built up anger and they fight and then they're okay afterwards. And I felt like that's kind of what I got, except now you have a quote past his prime fighter who now has the title again. And I don't know that felt earned because we had to get to the place where from Creed 2 to Creed 3, Adonis is now a family man, and it felt a little rushed getting to that point so that we could get to the Damien story to get to the point where he wins the title in an interesting way in order for Adonis to then create this grudge match that's all about him versus Damien, surrounded by the title shot. And so there's a part of me that thinks I can buy the grudge match. I can buy the playground fight. But there were times when I was like, this may have worked a little bit better if you took the Rocky V plot and put it in here, where it wasn't about a title shot, but it was about two guys who were trying to prove that they earned their life and that the life that they were trying to exert upon each other was one that neither of them needed to apologize for. So by the time you get to the end, the lines that Adonis was saying to Damien, hey, it's not on you either. I didn't really know what to do with that. To me, that just felt like, okay, let's put a bow on this. And I was almost anticipating when he left the locker room to turn around and say, hey man, your family too. Why don't you come join us? Because, Damien was like, go with your family. And it says like, I'll see you around. And I don't know how I felt about that. That felt a little bit more honest because I didn't want it to wrap up too much like a bow. But I kind of wanted, to me, to see Damien as someone who just holds on to that bitterness and leave. Because to me, that's who I saw in the entire movie, is someone who was like, I need this. I've earned this. I want this. You beat me down. Okay, I'm going to walk away. And that's going to be it. But instead, you give me a reconciliable moment that I don't feel was quite earned. In fact, there's a line, and this is one of the weird parts about the theater experience, is Damien says something like, there's a quiet pause after he sits down, and Damien says, so I guess you did learn some moves while I was gone. And half the crowd just like erupts with laughter. And Krisha leans over and she goes, was that supposed to be funny? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think it was. So I don't know if that was a tonal issue or whatever, but we weren't laughing. Like, I felt like this moment was supposed to be serious. And then you got these people behind me like, bah, oh yeah, you did. You totally did that. And I'm just like, this isn't an action comedy. This is a drama. And so it was just things like that I felt as though you're trying to sort of mature the story that probably doesn't need to go beyond what it already is.
Sounds like we had a very similar reading of this then, which is not, for the record, across the board. Like, I have some friends who, several of them, say they thought that this was the best Creed movie. This was a 5-star trilogy now. One of my good friends, Andy, came out of it literally saying this was one of the best theater experiences he's ever had in his life. He loved it that much. And I just can't connect with that. And I wonder if that's because of the style, right? And the bigness of the cinematic experience. I mean, the boxing scenes, we'll talk about them in depth, but there's a reason why I think that connects with some people more than it connects with you and I. Because it sounds like we seriously both were just like, we were connected to story first and foremost. And that's where it was the biggest weakness for us. So I loved the setup of this. I agreed with you there. I think it's so much potential to have these two people and have somebody come back into his life, and there's eventually going to be a boxing match with this person, right? I thought that the setup in the beginning, the opening scene being like them as kids and being rather lengthy, was a smart move because I cared about that pairing by the time we got to Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors. They didn't have to sell me on the two of them anymore because we knew them as kids, right? And I really liked that and getting to see that. And then where the things that you're saying you had issues with were glaring for me at the movie, and they have only become bigger to me since seeing it. And that is the fact that I think you're totally right. Like, I wish this had not been about a belt. I wish this had been a grudge match. This is the first time that a franchise film has, though, been specifically about a guy with a relationship with another guy one-on-one. Like, usually the relationships come after the fights in this series. Once they've already fought and had a battle, then they come together and like become friends or whatever the case may be. But in this one, they already have had that friendship, and so it's in reverse, which is such a cool concept. But man, I gotta tell you, like, first of all, so I'll go down my laundry list. First of all, we have the title shot for Dame. Now, this is not unheard of. I mean, literally just last night, UFC fighter John Jones, first time ever fighting as a heavyweight. He had not fought in UFC professionally in over 3 years due to legal issues, suspensions due to drug tests, and all sorts of other reasons, injuries, etc. He's never fought as a heavyweight, but he stepped into the ring last night after 3+ years into a title fight. I have a problem with that because I don't care if he is a legend. I don't care if he's a Hall of Famer for what he's done over his career. He hadn't done it at the heavyweight level. He hadn't done it in 3 years. And to me, the people that have been boxing or fighting in UFC or whatever the sport is that have been doing the work up for the last 3 years, who the number 2 contender is, the number 3 contender, like that's the person that deserves a title shot. I will always believe that. But boxing and UFC are combat sports that are not just about putting the best versus the best. They are about promotion. Don King is a thing. Dana White is a thing. Like these sports, their goal is to make money first and foremost and put exciting matchups that people want to watch. They don't care about the sanctity of you earned the right to necessarily be the next guy to get a title shot. If you're not flashy and fun and interesting, then you may get passed over. So there is precedence to that. But the way that Dame gets his title shot to me was completely unbelievable, because where it differs from something like John Jones is that he doesn't have a 10-year Hall of Fame career to fall back on. Dude just got out of jail and he won some matches as a Golden Glove boxer as a teenager. Like if you're telling me that 13, 15 years later, all of a sudden the world isn't in an uproar, that this guy is getting put in the ring for a title fight, like right off the bat, like there's just no way. I just don't believe it. And I felt like it made it worse that they used ESPN segments. I think this was the poorest use of ESPN real life segments that I've seen. The first film is brilliant. Coogler integrates those and they feel like you're really watching the fights live. This one felt completely manufactured to me and false. They did not land at all. And it didn't work. And I wonder if part of that is just because of the scenario. So maybe I'll stop there and I'll go to point 2, but I'll let you talk about that if you want. But I just could not. I had a really hard time getting past the fact that he even got put in that opportunity because there were so many other people. Yes, now Drago can't go. Okay, what about the other like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxers that are like waiting in line? You know, and where are they at? And why is no one upset?
Well, and I think to the credit of the film, there is that pushback by Duke Burton, Little Duke, who says, don't do this, where Adonis is like, this is a payday. Felix needs a payday. And in some parts, I think that he respects Damian enough as a fighter to say this isn't going to be a wash. Although, before the fight, he signs to his daughter, it'll be quick or something like that, or he's in agreement that it's going to be quick. That being said, I'm in complete agreement with you. And I think what makes it hilarious is that he has no gym that he is coming from. He comes from Crenshaw. He's representing Crenshaw, the city, not necessarily a gym or a promotion. And just a little fun fact here. The kid that plays a young Damian Spensemore II is in or played in a number of episodes on a CW series called All American, which takes place, at least in part, at a school in where? Crenshaw. So a little bit of continuity there. I like that. But I absolutely agree with you. Even as someone who doesn't follow combat sports, I'm not into boxing or UFC. I'm sort of corporately or communally involved. Like if somebody's going to say, come over and watch this fight, and I'm like, show me, teach me, whatever, I'm into it that way. It does not make sense because I'm thinking, what flash does Damian have to offer? Except for the fact that he's this mystery guy. And so what happens here for me is that if I look at it from a boxing point of view, and he takes down Felix, granted, he does it by cheating, which in and of itself, I mean, it's going to happen. The fact is, he pummels Felix, but he doesn't pummel him like Drago does Apollo. So this is sort of the parallel that I saw is, okay, you got arrogant Felix who's like, I'll take you down. I can wail on you. And you've got Damian, who's basically like the quiet Drago. I never felt like there was dominance. Like there were shots from Michael B. Jordan's directing, the cinematography kind of showed that, but I never felt like it was anything more than just cheap, like a cheap fight that 9 times out of 10, Felix would have wailed on this guy because Felix has the history. Felix is the champ, and that's what he's promoted as. Like, he keeps just destroying sparring partners. So yes, would he compete well? And did he compete well with Damian? Yes, they were well matched. But not only did it seem unfair, it didn't seem believable in the fact that this is a 1 out of 1. And you have to be able to, in your boxing career, earn that title shot. Even though, as you mentioned, the promotion and the bigness of it is what sells it, there's a point where if you had Felix 6 months later take on Damian, I guarantee you he would have beaten Damian. Because Damian's not unbeatable. Why? Because he's 1-0. That was the thing that stood out to me, is that there's one point when one of those ESPN graphics is coming up there and it says 1-0, undisputed champion. I'm like, that's a joke. That's a joke, right? So let me do it. I'll get my face kicked in to potentially be 1-0 and the undisputed champion. Like, there's no history, which means there's no respect. I don't respect Damian as a boxer, and maybe I'm not supposed to. But to me, it sort of deflated even more when Creed gets in the ring. And who does he look at on the right and give a little nod to? Well, it's Felix, who's giving him a nice little, yeah. If I'm Felix, I'm like, dude, let me fight him. I deserve that rematch. And that's kind of, it just, from the boxing standpoint, it felt really much like you know what? I need to do this myself. And I'm like, do it in the schoolyard. Don't do it in the ring.
Well, I think to the last part, I'll go back in a second, but I think I agree with you. Like, in a realistic scenario, that's how this would go down. But I think there's an element of Dame is the champ now, and Dame gets to make the choice, and Dame was not going to fight anybody other than Creed. Like, that's what he wanted, right? I mean, that was the
Sure.
one segment on ESPN that I actually thought was interesting, is when he goes on to talk with, I don't know who it was, Stephen A. Smith maybe, and
Yeah.
Dame calls in and is like, let's go. I actually enjoyed that. That part was pretty good. What you were talking about, though, on that first fight, and I agree. So I think what we learned from that is that Dame is powerful, and Dame is a better boxer than people would expect. And that if you underestimate him, which is what this series is all about, is not necessarily that he's the best, but that if you underestimate this guy, he can take enough punishment, like Creed and Rocky are built on taking punishment. Like, he can take enough, and he is strong enough to make you pay for your mistakes. But like you, and this is one of my 2 humongous issues, is he cheats to win that fight. He is frequently dirty. There are not points taken away. He is not disqualified from that fight, but he is consistently fighting dirty and dangerous and making illegal punches. And there's never any, like, consequence for this at all. He wins. He gets to be heavyweight champion of the world. We don't see how the rest of the world reacts to this at all. You know what I mean? And then the other part is leading up to that final scene, because there is no consequence to the fact that I love Jonathan Majors. He is truly one of the next generation's greatest actors. And I think everybody is understanding that and realizing that right now. He is on this run. This year is going to be his year. He's phenomenal. And I love the chemistry of Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors together. They came out in some interviews and were talking about, like, they wanted to do tons of movies together in different genres. And I'm like, I'm here for that. Like, bring that on. These guys are phenomenal actors. My issues with the story, right? And I actually looked it up, by the way. Keenan Coogler, you know what his credit is? His one credit before this was he was one of the writers on Space Jam 2. Okay, listen, that's not like something to, like, be proud of. Like, I don't know why you're one of the 2 writers on this movie. Now, the other writer of this movie, the only real credit under his name is he wrote King Richard. So that's a good movie. That's actually some solid work there. I will give that. But anyway, a little bit of issues here. So what my big problem is that this man came out of prison, and all implications from the story are that he hired or had his friend literally commit assault against Drago to injure him and take him out of a potential title fight. You cost him millions of dollars. You literally broke his bones, and there is zero consequence for this story. Creed knows it, and all he does is go in there and be like, we're good. I'll see you out there. Like, we fought it out in the ring and it's okay now. It ain't okay now. Like, I'm sorry, but this is my problem. It is not okay now, period. And the story did not do that justice for me, because Dame needs to go back to jail. Dame is not okay. Dame, like, has his buddies on the beach, like, waving guns at people, like, threatening them. This guy, I don't care what he was when he was your son, and I have empathy for him. I have empathy. I do not have sympathy, because he takes his actions as an adult, and he is a thug, and he does everything wrong and everything hurtful to other people, and he gets to walk away with some shame that he lost a title that he didn't even need to have. Like, where's the consequence to what he did? And this is my whole problem. Like, I love the performances, I love the characters, but my goodness, the ending just really left me, like, obviously with this rage.
Yeah, I think the summary statement is the whole is not greater than the sum of its parts. Or maybe that's a bad way of putting it. Again, there were pieces that were spectacular, and I think the summary of all this is that exactly what you said. I think that there's something interesting about Jonathan Majors' character, because he's quiet. The way that he actually postures himself physically. This is something that I found really interesting. Several weeks after watching Quantumania, where he's this other dude entirely. But watching him as Damien, even at the start when he's having lunch with Adonis, how he's sort of keeled over, and he's like, thank you. I appreciate that. He almost feels like the whole movie, he feels unstable, like he's about to explode in different ways. There were times when I was thinking, does he have some kind of, like, is he on the spectrum? What's happening here? Because he doesn't seem to work societally, functionally. He seems to be atypical, is what I would say. An atypical human being. And there's something really compelling about that, Aaron, because what we only know is that he spent 18 years in prison. We know that at some point he met up with this crew, of which one of them took down Drago. But I would have loved to have seen how prison affected him. All we got was that prison made him stronger. Prison gave him more strength, that he'd been working out and he'd been training, and so he's ready to do this. If you had told me that there was some kind of, like, crazy trauma that happened while he was in prison that thwarted his understanding of the world, that he saw everybody as the enemy, or that something like really traumatic happened in prison, how that would affect how he is in the ring and how he earns this, that would have been something really, really cool, because you have Adonis taking him under his wing, not knowing about all this stuff, and then somebody else comes into the fold that knew him, that knew Damien in prison, and says, you don't know what went down. You never heard the letters. You didn't, like, that's another component of, like, I thought that was really cool that he had written all these letters. We never saw anything in the letters specifically, just that he wrote them. And so the takeaway is that, oh, you didn't care about me. Again, elementary. Yeah, that's a story component that I'm familiar with. Oh, you didn't. This is over the top, by the way. This is another Stallone movie where a kid gets letters written to him from someone who loves him, and he never knows because they're being hidden by somebody else for their own good. Again, not bad to use, but expand on that. What's in those letters? What's he talking about? What's happening in his world? Because all that stuff affects who he is as a fighter, or it could. And throughout the movie, I never cared about prison because I never knew about it. All I knew is he took one for Damien, or he took one for Adonis. He was in prison. Now he's fighting again, and now he's got to fight Adonis. Those are the plot points, and I don't know that they were compelling enough for me to feel like this was a fantastic movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it boils down to. It's like the pieces are there, the characters are there, the bones of the story, timeline and trajectory are there. They just don't come together in a way that makes it great. And, like, there's just little things, right? Like Felicia Rashad as Mama Creed. So this guy has been sending letters to Adonis for years, and she has hid them from him, put them in a box so that he could never find them, right? But somehow she remembers a face. What happened to be on one of these like pictures that were sent 10 years ago of this guy that she randomly saw a mugshot of on TV. And that triggers her to go back into this box. I don't buy that. Like, this is a woman on her deathbed, apparently. Another whole plot line that I don't know why it needed to be in this movie, frankly. I don't know that it just felt extra to me. Like, I didn't feel like it had enough weight on it. If they were going to go that route, we weren't building up to this. Like, she just got sick in this movie and then she died. And it sucks. Like, she's gone, but I don't know. It felt like almost like we were like having to write off everybody that existed in the previous generation in some way or shape or form so that we could completely move freely from them with Adonis, his wife, and his age group. Anyway, I found that to be a little bit of a miss too. But generally speaking, yeah, like the idea of Dame being this young boxer who had this great potential, and Adonis as someone who was raw and like the kid that we met in Creed when we first saw him get adopted, like kid in the foster home, he earned the juvie he just fighting everybody, right? I felt like this was a consistent depiction of him as a kid, someone who would look up to this, friend of his that is already great at this thing that he wants to do as well. And then to have him go down by essentially stop saving Adonis when Adonis started a fight, and yet there's total sympathy for why Adonis would start that fight, right? Because this is a guy who had abused them in a home. Like, all that stuff, man, it's such a great setup. And I think we get franchised sometimes. Like, why does Drago need to be in this movie? To be knocked out? Like, to show us that, like, he's Bud? Like, him and Ricky both are in this movie. Like, Pretty Ricky. Like, Conlon. It's like, okay, so Creed's friends with them now because you have to do that because Rocky was friends with your dad after his movie? Or, like, why do we need to do that? Why can't they just go away? Like, they were there for their movie. Let's move on, right? So there's like, I don't know, there's just little strands of things that I can't help but not think about, even though when I'm watching this, I really enjoyed it. Now, I want to transition and talk about that part, because this is what was weird for me, Patrick. I loved the not boxing storyline probably more than the boxing and the boxing storyline for the most part. So the struggles of a retired champ who doesn't know what to do with his time, coinciding with a wife who has been losing her hearing. Again, wonderfully played progression throughout the 3 films, who is having to stop performing and move into a role as a producer in order to still do what she loves to some extent, but it's not the same. Just like it's not the same for Adonis to be a manager and a promoter as it is to actually be in the ring himself. They're like parallel struggles. The inability of Adonis to communicate with his wife, the young daughter, so Amara, the actress stole the show for me. I thought she was so freaking good in this movie. I loved her character. It was another bit of a miss there for me too, was the fact that we like set up really early in the film this understanding that she has been watching her dad, who's this boxer, and now she has violent tendencies that are developing because of what she's been around. And they're like, yeah, don't do that. And then they like champion her becoming a boxer, essentially. Like, that seems to be where the plot is headed, but they never really come back full circle and deal with that in a way that I felt they should have. But that being said, like, I loved that was there. Like, all the stuff that was the through line of Adonis's like family unit situation, the drama in this movie, I thought was great.
Yeah. And I wanted it to thread a little bit tighter between the three of them, because the plot line, or the thread that stood out to me was that first one. In watching both Adonis and Bianca find success in their respective careers, but finding it in both boxing and singing, and then post, like financially, they are both successful on the back end. There's a great line that Damien says at the party where I think it's Drago gets injured. He's asking Bianca, he says, how does it feel to have somebody else singing your song? And she goes, I couldn't really complain if it's her. It was a phenomenal song, by the way. I loved it. And I love how she sort of postures herself with him, because she sort of knows what he's doing, that he's trying to make her feel less than what she is. Like, oh, you're not a singer anymore. And she's like, yeah, but you know what? Being talented in an industry that is as wide as it is, I don't have to. Look, I've got a guy that, I don't know if anybody listening knows the band Evanescence that came out of Little Rock, but there was a guy who wrote pretty much a third to 2/3 of their songs named David Hodges. I got a chance to, he led worship at a church I was part of for a while, got a chance to know him. Incredibly talented. And if you're listening to any kind of top 40 pop culture songs, he's probably written them. Like, that's how much of an influence he has. Kelly Clarkson, David Archuleta, basically, if you're on American Idol, he probably produced one of your songs if you were successful. But do you hear about him specifically? No. I don't know why. He's got a great voice. His songs are pretty phenomenal. They all have the same kind of flavor to them. And yet you don't hear his voice, but you hear his voice through the music of these popular singers. And I think this is how Bianca is that she's transitioned to be a producer and being able to still create music. And yes, she's written these songs. She can't sing them because of her hearing. That aspect has gone away. And I think she's actually reconciled that. I mean, she and Adonis are both walking through that post-spotlight life, and yet she's moved on. And this is something that I think Jordan was trying to touch on, which is, do I have what it takes to get back to that? And I think that's where the title shot sort of came in, because he's now a promoter. His manhood, his ability to get back seems to be in question. And so the title shot sort of validates that. And I felt like that was sort of the wrong step for me, because I think the theme there should be, can you be successful without having to go backwards?
That's interesting.
And
that's more interesting.
It's what Apollo did. Apollo could not lay it down. He could not move on, and he got beat down at the hands of Ivan Drago.
Right.
And I almost wanted to let that happen to Adonis here. Get beat down and then have a follow-up match or something where you're just in the streets banging it out with this dude.
That would have been interesting too, actually. But yeah, I mean, I wanted the series to evolve. And I feel like in the end, and I'll be honest, I went into this thinking and hoping that this was going to be the end. I wanted a perfect capper of another trilogy, and then let's be done. And I read right before stepping into the theater that B. Jordan had already said that Creed 4 was a go, and that spin-offs are being thought of and developed. You can already tell there's going to be something with Amara. There's no way they're going to not bank on this being the most, the highest grossing box office opening weekend of a sports film in history. Like Jonathan Major's star is shining. They're going to keep it going because that's what Hollywood does. But the potential was there to make this a wrap up. That was another issue, I guess. Not the other, but another issue is, like, he comes back and we're just time jumping, dude. Like, he's in the very beginning of the film, he's having his last fight, and then he retires, and we're supposed to go through this whole retirement, but then we jump like 3 years in the future or something, and now he's back in the ring, but we never really see him retired. I mean, it all happens in one movie, and it happens so fast that, if you were going to do that, you need to stretch it out, and that needs to be your next movie. But again, I don't want that. I don't want you to just keep following the Rocky transition of like coming back, going out. Fighters can't fight. Like we've done all of this. You got like bring us something new.
Yeah, and I think that the feeling I got, Aaron, was the feeling I got at the end of Fallen Kingdom, where we had about 4 different things that we're left with. And so Dominion had the opportunity to say, take one of those threads and run with it, because all of those have potential. And we got a 5th thread in the form of like mosquitoes. But I think that in the same way, Fallen Kingdom was 2 movies. You had the escape from the island and then this whole interesting thing with the dinosaur auctions and stuff. I think Creed 3 has about at least 2 movies in it where you have the story of Damien and Creed and the backstory, evolving that out. And you have a story of Creed and Bianca. What is it like to live a life post-Spotlight? Because both of those, I think, have compelling elements to them. And so when you're kind of fighting those, when you're kind of combining those together, they get truncated. I mean, you have to edit, you have to cut down, you have to get it into 2.5 hours. It's just a product of putting things in one film. And so I don't like this reactionary approach to franchises. I want it to be, it's 3 and it's done. Let's tell our story. Unfortunately, movies work like network television, where if you got the bucks, you can make more. If you don't, you're not. So how do you make sure that you're creating a complete story? In the case of a TV series, a season. In the case of a movie, one particular entry. How do you balance being able to tell a complete story and leave things open? And it's a problem that I don't think will ever go away. But I'll go on record in saying that it hinders the integrity of the story. Creed 3 had the chance to be completely independent of the Rockyverse. And really, that's not really by accident. I mean, Stallone has gone on record and said as long as Winkler's the executive producer, he's not going to come back. He'll work with Michael B. Jordan again, but he's gotten a bad taste in his mouth. Maybe Felicia Rashad did too. Maybe she's like, I'm done with this. Or maybe it's like what you mentioned, that they're just trying to get rid of the old people from the previous generation so they can create this, what I would call a rock and roll hip hop Creed is what this was. Maybe that's what's going on. And all that style that you mentioned is, again, one of those elements that looks great in its little pocket. So I actually enjoyed visually all of the fight sequences. Maybe the montages weren't really doing it for me, because you had like 2 get up moments. You had the one where he's getting beat down by Drago, and then he has a little flashback and he's like, I'm gonna take my safety gear off now and let's go after it. And then he does the same thing in this title fight. And I'm like, dude, one or the other, okay? You know, you don't have to combine the 2 kind of Rocky 4 montages into 2 minutes. I felt like fight, get stronger, make us believe that you can, and then have your dramatic moment. But like the way that Jordan shoots this, it's very much like a rock and roll hip hop video. Like it's all about the energy. The cuts are so tight, they're quick. And I think that's why people gravitate towards it, because it's exciting. It's not boring. I mean, if you watch a boxing match, it's boring. Like it's guys dancing around. It's not meant to be dramatic. It's meant to be like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And the way that you see quick shots, like I don't know much about boxing. The way that Damien blocks by putting both of his hands sort of crossing each other, I've never seen that before. That's pretty interesting. And I love those little parts. I just don't know that they necessarily sold me on the story as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I read, so I know that they were inspired by certain styles of some boxers. You know, Mike Tyson was on that list. George Foreman was on that list. I don't remember who else was on that list, but Bernard Hopkins was on that list. So they definitely looked at that. So I know that they were actually working to make it look legit, and it feels that way to me. I was on the other side of this. Unfortunately, this was my least favorite boxing action of the entire series, and this is where I was saying I also understand that people like my friend Andy were like enamored with it and absolutely loved it. The sound design is phenomenal. Visual crispness is outstanding, but it's also shot extremely tight, lots of up close, like up next to the bodies. Most of that did not bother me. What bothered me was the anime style. And Jordan talked about that. And I didn't know that going into the film, but when I read that article or that quote after the fact, it was like, okay, that's exactly what I feel like. The moment we start seeing like slow motion over and over with like a body, like a fist going into a chest and, water droplets in slow motion coming off of it, that was just not what I want from a boxing movie series. I have watched a boxing anime, actually, oddly enough, that does a lot of stuff like that, and it looks really cool in animation, cartoon, visualization, but like here, it just felt completely at a conflict for me with the dramatic tone of the out of the ring stuff. So when we got in the ring, it felt so heightened, and you said it, like it's like rock and roll. It's modern. It is all about like what cool tricks can we do with the camera. It's not just get in the ring and fight. Now the choreography was good, the acting is good. Again, all that stuff. And I didn't hate it. It just, there's not a single fight in this film that was remotely as memorable or as interesting to me from a boxing standpoint as anything in the other two films. Like, but all the fights in the other two films I would put above it. The other problem with it was that final fight for me is when we go into like, I'm going to flip from round 2 to round 11, and we're just going to get all fancy and go artistic on you now. And so it's like, I did not feel like Jordan had a great command of what he wanted to do. I felt like he was trying to put too many different styles into this movie, like the heavy drama family style stuff and the Damon and Adonis relationship. That's like just streets, like good drama, like just drama. And then we had, when the ring, it really turns into that like bombastic anime stuff. And then when he does that like visualization of a completely like out of body experience where it's just them and there's nobody in the ring around them, and it's just I don't know, man. It took me out of the movie, unfortunately.
Yeah,
and I didn't connect with it as much because of that. It's so weird because like when I'm watching it, I liked it, but it was like holding me back from embracing it. Mm-hmm. I did not feel that energy that I felt in the past where I'm unable to control myself, where I'm literally just motivated out of pure, unadulterated, like, energy to like leap up and cheer and fist bump. I felt nothing like that.
Mm-hmm. There's I meant to go back, and I knew I wouldn't be able to because of just being busy. I wanted to go back and watch the previous entries. I knew I wouldn't need to because there's not, again, for better or for worse, there's not a lot of connectivity to previous entries. You can watch this without watching Creed 2. Of course, you've got this, my wife turned and goes, Drago? He had a kid? Because she didn't go see Creed 2 with me. So like, yeah, whole other thing. We can watch that later. But what I felt like is exactly, you're spot on when you said that the styles that he is working with are almost like a play set. And he's like, I want to try this, now I want to try that, now I want to try this. And he's trying to fit them all in to this story that you have, in order to be like really successful, you got to be consistent in those things. And so if you're giving me, I didn't mind the anime style, like the slow-mo, the water droplets. I thought that was, the stylization of that I think is different. It's not my favorite. I'm still always going to go back to Coogler's one-shot boxing match. It's not even the one that he fights at the end of Creed 1, but it's my favorite of any of these, like even beyond Drago. It is absolutely phenomenal because it's tight. It's right there. You're not cutting back and forth. You're always with him. And I think it also adds to the quickness of how strong he is. When you take a match like this, if you've sold me on a grounded story, on a salt of the earth, urban, grudge match. And then you elevate that stylistically, not even just with the way in which you're showing punches or impacts. I think, that shows the power of these two. But when you go to that surreal place where it's just those two, and then at one point, Adonis hits the side of the ropes and then a prison door pops up. I'm like, okay, are we going to get 4 of these now? And then it doesn't happen again. And then we get him hitting Damien, knocking him into the corner. And that corner turns into the amateur cushion thing. And so I was sort of getting what they were saying, like, oh, yeah, you got, juvie, and you got, the amateur boxing, the past, we're fighting in the past. To me, that was a little too stylized, a little too fantastic, because it took me away from what's happening. And the problem is, what I was thinking about after we get back to round 11 of 12 is that neither of these guys look like they had fought 11 rounds. I mean, if you're pounding each other like that, your face is going to look like meatloaf, okay? Because you're hitting each other so hard. And it felt like they had been, like, when they announced, oh, that was a brutal round, and before they said 11, I was like, oh man, was that round 4? What, round 11? What? No. If you're going to give that time that passes, you got to show me a little bit more, like, boom. And so by the time we get to round 12, I'm like, dude, they could go another 12 rounds. This is a 24-round fight because they have enough fought. I never saw a time duration in this because, again, the style told me it's right here, it's right now. And so if it's right here, right now, I've got a mental clock in my head going, this is only 2 minutes. This is only 1 round. This is not 11 or 9 at this point, if you're doing the math right. And I think that's where I had trouble. Now, in and of itself, it's a cool sequence. I love stuff like that. But it was inconsistent with what we had seen before. Just keep us in the ring. Keep us in Dodger Stadium, which is really, really
which
cool.
Which was super cool, by the way.
I love that.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is Dodger Stadium.
Battle for Los Angeles.
That's awesome.
You got a guy from Crenshaw, a guy from LA. I mean, yes.
And then we fade it out. And we don't use it.
And then what are we doing here? So I understand the intent. I just don't know that it was necessarily given what we saw before. I don't know that it was executed in a way that was consistent with everything else. I would rather have heard the crowd. You know what? If you're going to do that, man, put him in prison. Put him in a juvie hall. There's actually I don't know if you ever saw the trailer. I was looking for this, but there's a moment where Creed and Damien are in like the common area of a prison, and like all the prisoners are yelling, Creed, Creed, Creed. And that's what I thought was going to happen. I thought that when that first jail wall came up, I was like, oh man, are we going to transition to like prison? And then like the crowd from LA is going to be like, Creed, Creed. Is it going to transition from like the prisoners? To me, that's something interesting because it harkens back to what was it like when they were in prison for a short period of time together? So all that stuff, I think the spectacle of it is cool. It's just not connective in a way that makes me go because of that. Like it's cool in and of itself. And it's like watching a music video. And so it's like I'm watching this music video and then we get a commercial, which is the drama. And then we get another music video of a montage. And then we're back to more drama, which is the commercial. So it's kind of like I'm watching MTV boxing edition when it comes to Creed 3. And I think for a lot of people, and I go back to the movie theater experience that I had, one of the things that was going through my head is like, the reason these kids won't sit down is because they're so like attention deficit. Like they can't sit still. They have to be flipping. And to me, I felt like maybe you can't do that with a Creed movie. Maybe it has to be constant boom, 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 which is where Stallone was critical of Rocky IV. He felt like the drama was lost because at the time you needed a political rock and roll story with lots of quick cuts, great montages to keep your audience entertained. And I felt like that was sort of the crux of this is we need when we're going to fight, we need to be fast. We need to be quick. We need to be, well, I say fast and quick. They're the same thing, but we need it to be very much like you can't look away because you're going to miss something. You're going to miss one of the cool 15 punches that are thrown. And that's not bad, but when that's what keeps your audience, you're missing something on the story side.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It sounds so negative. Like I know I just don't people are listening, probably, oh, what do you mean you like this movie? Are you crazy? No, I truly did like it. Like, I enjoyed myself overall. I just have such high expectations for it. I mean, truly, Creed and Creed 2 were like right there at the top of my Rocky rankings, and I felt like this was not. And so I love all of the Rocky movies, like, mostly all of them.
Let's not talk about one of them, please.
Some are just, I mean, there's like levels, right, to this. And that's the thing is, I just was expecting, you're always going to go into what you think is a trilogy capper with expectations that are through the roof because you want to see it completely land the plane and to bring all those themes and all those characters home in a way that is utterly satisfying. And I just didn't feel like that. It's funny because I'm going to be seeing here very soon John Wick Chapter 4, and I felt very similar to that. Like, 3 just started to lose me because it keeps going and it keeps expanding on its mythology, and it wants to like do more so it can have a 4th movie and a 5th movie and a TV series, and everything is doing that, Patrick. It's like, I just want you to tell me your story. That's why we love Warrior. Warrior was phenomenal. It's one movie. Doesn't need anything else. It works. One movie, right? That's it. It's good. Creed. Didn't need Creed 2, to be honest. Like, Creed, by and of it, large of it in and of itself, was just a fantastic story. But Creed 2 could have easily just wrapped it up as well. I just needed this to be at a higher level than it was for me. And I think it was frustrating that all the pieces I felt were there. I felt like the passion is there. There's no doubt about that. The design is there. It's just, it wasn't quite put together. It needed probably like Coogler to come in and be like, hey, let me help you and show you what directing is like and where we can make choices that keep this thing a little more in line or something. I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't say. Maybe he loves it the way it is. But I did really like it still. I will still watch the whole trilogy over again. I will still be right there, gonna go see Creed 4, even though I don't think it needs to exist. I expect now, like I said, Creed 4 will follow Jonathan Majors. I just don't see how it doesn't. And I would expect that Amara becomes the feature, like if they do a spinoff, or maybe she's the primary, the protagonist of the next one somehow. Maybe we time jump again to where she's fighting as a, I don't know, teenager in Golden Gloves and Dame is her manager. That's going to be problematic for me again. Like, unless you spend time at the first of your movie dealing with the consequences and a change of heart. Like, you can't just sell me on your bros and you're in a relationship together and you're friends again after all that has happened. I need to see the dramatic work to make me believe that.
Yeah. It's a lot of history that I think needs to be reconciled that we didn't quite get in this entry. And I'm the same way. I think what Creed 3 does as a setup for future installments is it gives us compelling characters. Like, I could isolate Adonis, I could isolate Bianca, I could isolate Amara, I could isolate Damien. These 4 characters that I think have star power as solo stories. Now, I don't think we're going to get 4 additional movies that isolates each one of them, but they all have that star power to be able to, with the right with the right script, with the right director, taking care of the franchise, knowing what you've built, which is really successful, and not just milking a cow until it can't milk anymore, where then you have to slaughter it. I'm hoping that that's where we go. And I think, Aaron, you and I have the same sort of feeling about the Fast and Furious franchise. We have both agreed that 1 through 7, that's our series. But when Fast 10 comes out this year, we're going to go see it. Now, whether we cover it or not, I don't know. But again, the times I get to go to the theater with my wife are great because she'll lean over and she'll ask me questions, or she'll watch trailers. Like, there's the George Foreman biopic looks really good. We're excited about that. Excited about the Jake Gyllenhaal military movie. I forget what it's called, but that looks really good. And so the Fast 10 trailer came up and she's like, what do you think? And I was trying to explain to her with loud trailers playing in the background, Aaron and I like 1 through 7, but I'll definitely go see this because it's Fast and the Furious, because it's Dominic Toretto and it's the family. We've just tempered our expectations. And I feel like that's how it's going to be with the rest of the Creed movies, is unless something just insanely changes, these are going to be serviceable. They're going to be fun. They're going to be good. They don't have to meet our expectations. I mean, heck, we got Scream 6 coming out in a few weeks? Are you kidding me? I mean, talk about milking a cow, but you're still going to have your avid fans that are going to flock to the movies to go see that. Why? Because they're devoted, because they're like, what are they going to do next? This is going to be crazy. And they're willing to be apologists for the goofiness in those, just like we're willing to be apologists for how insanely big the Fast and the Furious franchise has gotten. We're unapologetic. That's our apology, is that we're unapologetic about how we love that. And I think with the Creed series, however many movies it goes, do what you got to do, but just, make sure that you're taking care of the franchise. Don't let it be a cash cow. Let it really feel good. I mean, even the Rocky series, with 5 being what I consider its dud, it knew when to say goodbye. Rocky Balboa, I think, was a great way to say goodbye to that character's story. He had stuff in the basement, as he said, and he got rid of it. And the way in which he ends his legacy makes perfect sense. It pays respect to his character, and it's not unrealistic. And so I feel like from here on out, have a plan, get your outlines together. How are you going to finish the Creed series? Is it going to be 6? Okay. Map out those 3 movies and really pour your passion into them, Michael B. As an actor, as a director, whatever, get Coogler on board and really finish it strong. If it's going to be 1, if it's going to be 3, let it be those things and then say goodbye, because that's what I think leaves a compelling legacy of a movie series, is when you know how to finish in a way that honors the franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hope that that's what happens. I'll tell you, I didn't miss Stallone here either, by the way.
Neither did I.
I'm fine with him exiting, whether he wanted to or not. I think it was time. I think 2 gave us the perfect time for him to move on and
Agreed.
for it to move forward. And so I am at least happy that we have an incredible cast of characters so far attached to this from this movie that could go forward. Just please bring me some experienced people to put this script together, and Michael B. Jordan, go make another movie or 2 in between, because you need some more experience as well. And then we can, bounce back for what hopefully will be something that is great for both of us. And let's not continue. I don't think we're going to continue down the Fast and Furious road, but it's really hard to maintain without starting to go down that slippery slope once you just keep going and going and going, especially in this sport, because frankly, there's only so many interesting ways you can put 2 people into a boxing ring together. There just aren't a lot of unique ways to create drama around that, other than changing the character and then making a different character go through the same things. So we shall see how that works. That's why I really truly believe in all my heart that we're going to go the Amara route and do this with a female, which I'm fine with. Yeah, and would be different enough that I'd be, interested to see how we handle that from a different gender perspective. For sure.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this edition of Feelin Film. Thank you for tuning in and listening. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation just like we have. Aaron, thank you for this conversation. We will talk soon.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. If you enjoy the show, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. These help increase visibility for the show and grow our community of listeners like you. We also invite you to connect with us further by joining our ever-growing Facebook discussion group. A link to that is in the show notes, or you can just search on Facebook and find us that way. If you'd like to continue the conversation with me, you can follow the show on Twitter @Feelin Film, or connect with me in the Facebook group. I'm very active in both places and would love to chat. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me at Shoeless Patch on both Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to tag me in any comments so that I'll be notified and not miss you. Once again, thank you for listening. We'll be back soon. Until then, stay positive.
And keep feeling film.